Okay, now let's get into a little bit of foundations. Let's play on Revit's strengths now, all right? And let's do what Revit does well out of the box. Let's place some isolated footings on our columns, but we want to see through this floor so we can see our foundation populate. So let's turn on our transparency, on visibility graphics, floors, and our transparency column, I'm gonna hit override, and let's just go with 50%. And I still have a white background, so let's just hit my options here, and let me just change this back to black. All right, there we go. Okay, so first things first, we need to set the base of our column. If we are referencing a structural set of drawings, let's just go with the typical number, -1 foot. So let's just select one column on your keyboard, hit select all, SA. And over on the properties, on the base offset, we're just gonna go with a nice clean -1. All right, that's the base, that's the starting point of all this. You can see what Revit thinks is more important. Revit doesn't really care about materials, right? It doesn't care that this is a slab on grade concrete floor or that those are concrete walls. It just sees vertical and horizontal. So we know, because you're in construction or you want to learn more about construction, you Google this stuff, that a slab on grade floor pours around a column. So let's do that change. The only thing we want to modify here are columns and floors. So select one column and the floor that's bothering it. And let's isolate these two categories now. You can do that on your glasses down here. Isolate category. All right. And now what do we want to do to those columns? We want to update the sequence of construction, right? Let's not say the joins, I want to switch. No, I want to update the sequence of construction. That's VDC. So to translate that is the switch join. So we go to Modify tab, the Geometry panel, and on the Join dropdown, we're going to hit Switch Join Order. Now, before I start, going gung-ho, take a look at your options bar. Get into that habit of looking at the options. I need to use the multiple switch because one floor is slicing through a bunch of columns. So let's click on multiple switch. And if you ever get lost on what to do next, look at the status bar. Bottom left-hand corner of your Revit session. Revit's talking to you. First pick, select the element to which another element is joined. This is my first pick, the big one. Second pick, select all the others. You can use a crossing window for this, like so. And now we'll hit escape. So you can see now the sequence of construction has been updated. The slab on grade is the last thing to get poured here, right? But you see how we created a different workflow so that Revit understood it. So we put columns in first because if we go to Structure Foundation now, Foundation panel, and we go to Isolated, we got a little preview there. Now we can choose Add Columns. I encourage you to do this task, to do a lot of this modeling with me in 3D, okay? Fight that tendency to go back to 2D. So let's do Add Columns, and same thing. This doesn't matter now. Why doesn't this matter? I should say I want this at level 2 or at level 1. Doesn't matter, you chose Add Columns. So what happens when we choose Add Columns and we do a nice crossing window, Revit already knows that if I hit finish here, we can't see anything because we did the isolate category, remember? So let's restore our view here. It put it at the bottom of the column. We are using what we already created to govern where subsequent elements will go. Let's do that again. Select one of those isolated footings, type in SA on your keyboard, and let's delete, okay? Now, let's go through that workflow. IF this time, isolate, footing, IF. Now we click at columns. We don't have to worry about selecting walls because the tool is at columns. Now we grab all of our columns. There is our preview. Now we hit finish. And Revit is warning us, but in this case, the warning is a statement. Hey, an attached structural foundation can move to the bottom of the column. Okay, cool. Do not get into the habit of ignoring warnings and alerts. Read it. It's Revit communicating with you, and you have to give it that respect. Because right now, if I close out of this warning and I hit escape a couple of times, remember that I mentioned to you what I do when I receive models from other consultants. First thing I do, I go Manage tab, and I go over here to Inquiry. And I see if that warnings button is highlighted. And if it is, I just take a look at the warnings, because not only is it cleanliness on the user, because there are some warnings you just can't fix, right? But I look at how many there are. So periodically throughout, as I populate my model, periodically, I go to my warnings. Like, did I miss something? Another important thing to note with warnings is that the more warnings your model has, the longer Revit takes to orbit, to work in the model. You ever heard the term, oh man, my computer's so slow? Sure, it might be your computer, but the biggest thing I ask sometimes is, how many warnings do you got? Because this is relatively a simple model, but if this were a tower, a 24-story tower, and there's a boatload of warnings, Revit has to regenerate that warning every time I orbit. Every time we click on an element that has the warning and we're just orbiting and adding more to it, Revit is regenerating and it's thinking about that. You know, it just never stops thinking and tracking it. So try to periodically clean up and look at your warnings, you know, list. Okie dokie. Oops. Here is where we're going to analyze a little bit more about VDC and how we translate that into a model. In the files that you have access to in those folders, we have a couple of samples, sample structural details. And let's pull up, you know, this, let's use this slab on grade detail. In a structural set of drawings, this looks great, you know, nice and clean. However, on the construction side of things, we're bridging both worlds, remember, that won't be poured at the same time. At least, you know, different subcontractors will do it differently, but from what I've seen, or, you know, the times that I've been involved, Revit, this will be poured like so. This part goes in first, and then after however long, they come in and they pour the rest of this, right? So we could model this in two elements, right? We could model a floor and then just one slab edge. That is a tool that exists in Revit. However, this is where we're going to start thinking outside of the box. We're going to now look at this from a different scenario. Instead of using this as two elements, what if we do three? Okay. Well, we already modeled our floor, right? In our virtual world, we already have our floor in. So that means we have to model this piece next, right? And then we can model a footing under it. So let's play on that. Let's work at that back corner, okay? Let's grab this column. Let's orbit to this back corner like this. And let's zoom into this corner. In your project browser, find the families section and open up that tree. And now let's scroll down until you find structural framing, and you'll see a new type of beam. And we're gonna look for thickened slab edge. And drag and drop thickened slab edge. Now this is a beam, so you could access this family by going to the beam tool, but we're gonna push things a little bit. Now, we know where the top of footing is supposed to be, right? We're using that number of -1 foot. So let's keep using that for the perimeter concrete detail. And let's look at our, before I start modeling, let's look at the construction of this family. Oh, the depth is 1 foot. It's a nice little default. And we're gonna leave the width at 1'6", okay? Now let's look at our options before we get trigger happy. On my ribbon, do I have existing lines that I can use? I do. I got that top edge of my floor that I can use, but I'm gonna use this cool little button called 3D snapping. Okay, let me use 3D snapping. And now let me select the top edge of my floor. And I'll select the other side. See the beauty of beams? Beams automatically join and cut back, especially if the family was created correctly. If the family was created to be a concrete material, it will behave as concrete. So if I zoom in there and I select that family and I do an isolate element, i.e., you can see that Revit automatically sliced it off, right? I didn't need to tell Revit to slice that beam tool in this world. I didn't need to tell it to slice it off. Okay, now let's keep building on that. Let's go back into our families on the left. Now let's go to continuous footing. And in this case, I'm not gonna use WF, wall foundation. Let's go with grade beam, or you can rename it. Let's drag and drop. This template's already semi set up, so you can see that the width under 1'6" already matches that thickening, right? It remembered our 3D snapping, and now we're gonna use the pick lines tool. And now, think about where this beam exists. Let's reference the photo. The beam happens from the bottom of the thickening down. That's where those dimensions make sense, right? So let's do that. Let's select this bottom edge. 1, 2. All right, don't worry about where it's populating right now. Let's escape twice. Now let me trim these together, TR. This beam, that beam, okay? Now if you wanna push them in, right, because we gotta match the detail, a couple of ways you can do that. We can use our good old align tool, AL, and you select your destination first, which is this vertical face and the one you want to align. All right, that's a way. You do it on the other side. Or you can select your beam tool and use the geometric positioning on the Y justification. You can play with left or right. All right, it's not left, it's actually right. And same thing over here. Let's see if Revit accepts right. There you go. Now let's cut a section through there. I know that I said don't focus on the 2D, but I want you guys to see how the 2D is automatically taken care of when we focus on the 3D construction of it first. And now let me do my you're probably wondering, why is it like this? Well, now let's assign some materials here. Let me select this thickening. Has no material assigned, so let's look at our materials. In the search, the top left, I'll type in concrete. And you should have some populated materials based on phase. They're all concrete. They all look the same when we slice through it, but we created duplicates and we gave them a different name. That way we can use these materials later on down the life of the job for scheduling, for material quantities, all that good stuff. So for the thickening, that's what we selected. When is that thickening going to be poured? Remember that image that we were analyzing when I was highlighting? It's going to be poured with the slab on grade. All right, so let's hit OK and OK. Now let's select our floor. And let's take a look at the floor. Why is it not joining? Ah, look at that. Structural materials, foundations. Whenever you see lines where there should not be lines, right there, case in point, the floor to the thickening, that line shouldn't exist. They get poured at the same time. Think about materials. I probably don't have the same material assigned. So let's assign the correct material to this floor. Edit type, edit. Let's change this material right here to slab on grade. And let's see what happens. Here we go. Nice, clean, no lines, nothing you have to worry about or 2D draft over or put a masking region over because you don't want to see the line. So with this continuous footing, same thing. Let's update this material right here, which means we got to update the family, which we'll do. And we change this material to foundations. That's when it gets poured. There we go. We got a line dividing the two, but the actual cut pattern is the same. Okay.